toko ingoa. Welcome to this webinar, where we'll be looking at changes made by Engineering New Zealand and ACE New Zealand to the Producer Statement series and accompanying quality documentation. So I'm Helen Davidson, I'm the Chief Executive of ACE New Zealand, and I'm your MC/host this morning. I'm joined by Martin Pratchett, who is the Engineering Practice Manager at Engineering New Zealand, and Adam Thornton of Dunning Thornton, and Distinguished Fellow of Engineering New Zealand, who's been working on this program of work with us, including to ensure we get a fair and robust set of documents that work for both engineers and BCAs. So it's been several years since our last update of the Producer Statement series, and 2013 since the last major overhaul. We had been receiving feedback from members that the documents were not flexible enough, and that's why we moved to review them last year, with a specific focus on automating them to make them more accessible and efficient to use. So last year we surveyed users, so yourselves, hopefully we're all involved in that, and BCAs, to better understand your experiences with the series. And we've used that feedback to develop the updated documents that we'll be talking you through today. It's important to note too that the documents have been subject to robust legal and insurance review throughout the process. So today, Adam and Martin are going to take you through these documents, and this is a chance for you to provide feedback. And there's two ways that you can do this. So we have a link to a survey that we'll send out after this webinar, so you can fill that in and give us your feedback over the next 2 weeks. And I see that Martin has also posted it in the Q&A chat there, so you should be able to access it through that link as well. You can also ask questions today, so use the Q&A chat line, If you're not familiar with Teams, that should be within the tools bar in front of you. We'll run through the session and then we'll do questions at the end. Now we do have a lot of people online, which is wonderful to see, but it means we will have a lot of questions, I expect. So I'm going to moderate those and pose those to Martin and Adam, and I'll do the best I can to capture all the themes that are coming through. If we miss your question, what we'll try and do is pull together some of the key themes and send out some responses to any that we can't answer today. So with that in hand, I'd like to hand over to Adam, who's going to take us through the changes to the producer statements first.
Thanks, Helen, and good morning, everyone. This morning I'm going to just talk about the changes that have appeared, that will appear on the new formatted producer statements. Martin will take you through the detail and how you use the newly formatted forms. But I thought just from a legal and liability point of view that people will want to know what the actual changes are. You have to say that the changes primarily are cosmetic, and it's about simplifying data entry and some revised formatting. There is no intention to change any relative liabilities or responsibilities. So what you're seeing up here is the top half of the, if you like, revised PS1, and I'm just going to take you very quickly through the various forms and just point out what has changed so you're aware of those. Starting right up the top, you'll see there's the newer logos for ACE New Zealand and Engineering New Zealand. And of course, you might notice that our colleagues, the architects, have dropped off. We all know that they really don't use the forms, and so we've sort of formalised that, and they are no longer mentioned on the forms. So first little change is a job number, and that's really for us as practitioners so that we can put our own job number on there. That was a request from many of us. Then a few change of terms. Because we don't have the architects involved anymore, we've changed the terms to relating to engineering. So rather than designers, or design firms, that is now issued by a PS1 is issued by an engineering design firm, and we're issuing it to a client rather than the developer. So the next change relates a bit to what you'll see this term quite a lot, Schedule 1, and that's really, and Martin will explain this, but there is now a very formalised second page, which is mainly blank, but it is for you to put in the particulars of the work, perhaps the scope of work, some details maybe if you're doing an alternative solution, details of maybe about what other experts you've relied on and when you've relied on proprietary solutions, those sorts of things. So Schedule 1 you'll see referred to in a number of areas. And so as we see down here, the proposed work covered by the producer statement is described in the drawing specified in Schedule 1 and other documents. So this Schedule 1 is where you put your, also where you, of course, where you put your contents of specifications and your list of drawings. So the second page, second half of the page, again, we're referring to Schedule 1 when we're describing the documents. And then down the bottom here, we see that it's signed by the name of the engineering design professional rather than just designer on behalf of the engineering design firm. I've highlighted the liability statement at the bottom, and that has changed a bit. Again, it's cosmetic. It's been reviewed by numerous insurers and lawyers, and we feel that this is the best version. And you'll see on this page here, there's in pink is the existing statement and in yellow is the proposed new statement. I won't go through that in detail. Martin will be sending out a copy of this and you can read that at your leisure. So move on now very quickly to the Schedule 1 page. It's a blank page. At some stage there may be some bits added in there, some like pro forma statements. Martin might talk to you about that. And then moving on to PS2, again, look very similar. We'll go through this pretty quickly. Beg pardon. So on the PS2, there are a couple more, slightly more significant changes. The bit in the yellow box, the top half, you can see the outline box. There's 3 or 4 statements in there, and the order of those has been changed. So again, no significant change to the content, but it's just in a now slightly more logical order. So you'll see here again, the reasonable ground statement is there, and we're still referring to VM1, all that sort of stuff, but otherwise no significant change. But there is one other change on this, and that relates to, I'll go back, there is no longer an all or part box for the PS2. Now, however, there is, you see in the bottom line here, there's a place on the Schedule 1 for you to very much determine the scope of your review. Now, those of you who've heard me talk about this before will have heard me say that I think it's appropriate in many cases to do a targeted review rather than an all-encompassing review for a PS2. But of course, if you do a limited review, it's very important to define that scope. For example, the way we work here in Wellington on a complex project, we will go and have a discussion with the local authority, usually Wellington City, and discuss with them the complexities, consequences of failure, and those sorts of things, and usually come up with an agreed scope of what is to be reviewed in detail. And then that goes out as a brief to peer reviewers, and of course then the peer reviewers, if they're sensible, will refer to that brief and the limitations within their report. So quite an important aspect, and I say this because I think that with the pressure of work that we're all under, we don't have the resources to be spending time on fairly mundane WL²/8 time reviews. Right, moving on to the PS4, the construction review statement. So this time it's issued by the construction monitoring firm rather than the designer, and that goes is copied through. Again, there's references to a Schedule 1. Of course, a Schedule 1 for a PS4 is different to the one for a PS2 and different for a PS1. It would be an individual Schedule 1 for each producer statement issued. So that's the PS4. And if we move on now to the updated guidelines, again, there is a few subtle changes here, nothing of any significance. This paragraph here, which has these highlights referring to part of the reasonable grounds, I think we thought this is quite important because the old statement effectively said that the BCA could rely on a producer statement. So I guess it's we all understand, and this is very much supported by MB, that BCAs need to have a proper policy and of review and audit where required. And so that's why we say that the PSA, the producer statement, provides part of the reasonable grounds necessary for the issue of building consent without necessarily having to duplicate a review of design or construction monitoring undertaken by others. So the other changes are really terminology. We talk about the engineering design professional for the PS1, the engineering design review professional for a PS2, and the independent engineering construction monitoring professional for the PS4. And the second page, again, some minor changes, nothing significant. I will let you read those at your leisure. Now, I'm just going to very quickly now take a couple of moments just to talk about the alternative series, the A series of producer statements. Many of you will hear talk of those. Martin and I have been talking about those for a year or two now. And I have to say that they are now very close. And once the revised standard producer statements have been launched, once Martin's had your feedback, and then they become, if you like, locked in, the intention is to then issue these the A series. Now, the purpose, for those of you who haven't heard them before, the purpose of the A series is for dealing with matters of design and review, construction monitoring that don't, for which a building consent application or a CCC is not involved. So it could be for things like infrastructure works, some roading works, maybe temporary works. Maybe it's applicable for building consent exempt, Schedule 1 works, maybe subdivision, tow bars, amusement devices, tower crane foundations, those sorts of things. So it's, look, just very quickly, again, I'll let you read through it for yourself, but in essence, the statements are very similar to the standard producer statements, but instead of referring to compliance documents from the building code, there is a number of alternatives. So you might just be doing a design, for example, in accordance with a New Zealand standard, in accordance with a code of practice, with a bylaw, maybe in accordance with a resource consent clause, all those sorts of things. And then there's the usual subject to verifications, site conditions, those sorts of things. And then the second half of the page, there's the usual reasonable ground statement. And for this PS1A, there's the usual monitoring stuff. So there has been Martin and Engineering New Zealand and ACE New Zealand both have quite a lot of requests for this because a number of regulatory authorities are starting to produce their own form of producer statement for non-building building code activities, and some of these forms are quite onerous. So we will encourage people to use these as much as possible. I guess just a final little word of warning, if you like, and related to that, they are specifically intended for use to issue to some form of regulatory authority. Ideally, they're certainly not intended just to give your client additional comfort, because that is covered by your short form or CCCS conditions of engagement. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll now hand it over to Martin.
Thanks, Adam. So, there we are. So as Adam was saying, we've put it online, and I've also been working for the last couple of years now to get the quality documentation that goes behind it. And you might say why. And for those who have been at the CSOC conference recently, then you've heard this talk before, and so my apologies. But around about 50% of RFIs that are generated throughout the country are around not the calculations and drawings that we do, but around the information that we present to councils before that. So it's areas that we put in with the PS1. It could be a lack of a design features report. People can't understand the assumptions, and so on and so on and so on. And so the idea is that we can provide this sort of thing to engineers, particularly smaller engineering firms who don't necessarily have the resource to spend a lot of time developing this sort of thing in-house. And to make it easy, we figured that we could just integrate it with the PS1s. And I see that there's been a fair number of people who have already been having a go at it since I put the link on into the description. And the first one of those came through at about 4 minutes past 10. So I only put the link on it at 10 o'clock. So in that time, they did a PS1, a certificate of design work, construction monitoring schedule, the design features report, and the B2 letter in lieu. So significant time saving there for people. Now, what I'll do is I will share the screen. Sorry, and get the which I'm hoping everybody can see now.
It's a yes, Martin, from me.
Brilliant,
Yep.
Thank you. And so what you'll have is you'll be able to just access it through a link that you can keep on your computer, much the same as that I just clicked on there. And then it comes down and it says, what do you want to do, right? You've got your PS1, your PS2, your PS4. Now with these, what we've done is we've designed it so that when you have issued a PS1, then you'll be able to click back in, and all of the details that are in that PS1 will link straight through into the PS4 for that particular job. So when you come through, and you say, what would you like to have? Certificate of design work, so on and so on and so on. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to do a certificate of design work, construction monitoring schedule, and design features report, because the rest of them follow through in much the same sort of format, and you'll be able to sort it out from there. One of the common issues that we've had, some of the feedback that I've had in the small group testing that I've done, is people saying, particularly with the likes of Hutt City Council, that they have to have $500,000 on their PS1s. And so we've built that into the system there after a fair amount of discussion, and the acknowledgement that that you need to be able to do that. So you come through. Now, all of these details that you have in here actually get saved onto your computer. And so I discovered that you can, and please don't ask me exactly how you do it, you can Google it, but you can set up the sections inside your browser so that it will remember, all of the details that you've got in there. So you can just put it in. Now, the name of owner and developer will almost always be individual. And so that can't, but for the purposes of this, once again, what we're going to do is and say that that it's me, essentially. And is this owner's address the same as the building works address? If you're doing a lot of residential work, then, quite often it is. And so then you click down into your consent authority. So it's Hutt City Council. This is for the certificate of building work. And as you can see, now for some reason this doesn't fill in. I'm not entirely sure why, and I will be speaking to the developer about it. And then it comes up with the building code clauses. Once again, it says in here, we recommend you don't sign for B2 using the producer statements. Someone's come up in the comments I saw and said, why not? And or I want to be able to sign for B2. We suggest reading through the guideline that we published and is sitting on inside the members area where you can download the producer statements from about exactly why we recommend that. So for this, what we're just going to say is B1. Now, one of the things that we've had recently, and Adam alluded to before about the job number on the producer statement, and this was brought up yesterday in the BCAs presentation that we did, and they said, how do we guard against fraud with people using engineers' producer statements or signatures? So the idea is that you will all have an in-house filing system, and you're most likely going to have individual job numbers for your jobs. And so if you have your internal filing system, and you can pretty easily see that that's job 3456, that will relate to a particular address. And if a PS1 goes out that isn't linked back to your job number, then it's pretty easy to prove that it's nothing to do with you. At the moment, that's the best solution that I could, or that we could come up with. And then the description of building work, the majority of things that we can have in here, it's either going to be a new build, alterations to an existing structure, or additions to an existing structure. I'd like to say at this point that at the moment, this is mostly set up around for structural engineers. The reason being that the majority of our chartered engineers are structural engineers. We are going to be moving through. I've got budget to keep adapting this through for geotech and fire as well. And so do expect that this will change and become more user friendly for the other disciplines as well. And so in here, I thought to myself, well, what are the most common things that you have? And so it's, you've got bracing, posts, retaining walls, portal frames, foundations, beams. If you've got other things that you commonly use in here, please let me know. It's pretty easy to add stuff in, right? And similarly with the other forms as well. If you've got ideas and so on that we can be putting in and changing, then please let me know so that we can change this and make this easier for you. I'm trying to retain as much as we can in tick boxes, because we had it before where you would be typing it in. It actually took a reasonable amount of time, and we're trying to cut that down and make it easier for you. So once again, those get copied down into, which part of that is that for you. That gets entered into Schedule 1. You can edit what's going into Schedule 1 through here. That makes it quite easy. And so you could put in there that you're using, a particular bracing system or whatever else it may be. So if we're going to include any design assumptions, what would those be? And so if I think we said that this was going to be an existing structure, and we're not doing any foundation work, so we won't mention anything about that. We could put in there that existing structure is, sound, for example. And then the level of construction monitoring. So we are working currently on the construction monitoring. One of the pieces of feedback that we had from the BCAs was that there are highly varied levels of construction monitoring coming through from engineers. And we understand that a lot of that is client driven. I'm currently working on the construction monitoring guidelines and a rewrite of those to level out the playing field and to make it so that it sells the client for you on having the appropriate levels of construction monitoring on there. So this is a residential, and so comes through and says that's going to be CM3. I shall wait for the comments to come pouring through on that one. And then supporting documents. So once again, we'll have a drawing set in there. We've got to have some calculations in there. We're not going to have a soils report or geotech report for this one. Unlikely to have a fire engineer's report. And so we'll go next. This is for the certificate of design work. You can see where you're up to in here. And what did we say it was going to be? Beams, weren't doing that, weren't doing that. Everything just disappears until you've only got the until you've got it there. So you need to state in there whether you've carried it out or you've supervised it. And so, you know, if you're a sole practitioner or you're doing the work yourself, then you would have carried it out. Otherwise, you know, you could be overseeing someone doing it and you would have supervised it. Once again, this comes through and it automatically fills out depending on what you had in the certificate of design work. This is now for your design features report. Got any other relevant design aspects? If you said yes, what are they? If you say no, then you don't. And then all you've got to do is click in to say what you've put in there. For the purposes of this, what we're going to do is we're going to say that because we've got our design features report, and we're going to put that in there, timber frame buildings and timber structures. Come through and select your wind speed zone. Oops. You would normally fill these in, of course, but for the purposes of this, I'm just not going to. Say no, there's no, or you can say yes, there are SED bracing elements, at which point you just put through, fill that one out. That comes through with your standard strength reduction factor. And so if you've got, it's just occurred to me that, you know, if we're not designing anything to do with the foundations, then we wouldn't be putting in the soil parameters. So we wouldn't potentially need to be worrying about that. If anybody spotted that, please put it down in the comments so that I do remember later. Then you've got your, what's your liquefaction risk? Low. Expansive soils? No. And so one of the things that we've worked on is to get your corrosion protection. And so what it does is it comes through and it says which zones are you in. If you're using exposed timber, this is to 3604, and then comes through. You can specify this so that, you know, you could be using stainless steel all the way through, for example, but otherwise it just comes through and comes up with your code requirements. Similarly for that. And that's straight out of 3404 and 3101. Now, what are we going to be monitoring in there? We said that it was going to be some beams and posts from memory. So the big change here is that when the BCAs are going to be looking for your construction monitoring reports, it's who is it going to be inspected by? And so for the likes of a fairly simple timber lintel, for example, then that can be inspected by a building consent officer. If it's a steel beam, then you know, that should really be being inspected by the engineer. But for the purposes of this, what we're going to do is say that it's a timber beam and that it's going to be inspected by the building consent officer. And then we would say that posts there, and that can be inspected by the building consent officer too. And that's it. So yeah, that comes through, acceptance of terms and conditions. Thank you very much, and submit. And those will be then emailed through to you. So as an example of what those are going to be looking like, excuse me while I figure out how to change the screen back onto the right one again. That should. Okay, so now you can see that PowerPoint slide?
No.
No, okay. Now you can see the PowerPoint slide. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And so this is what it looks like when it comes through. And so, you know, fairly standardized. You've got your design features report there. Anybody that has been using the design documentation that we've got on the website already, these are really just, you know, easier to fill out, more adaptable versions of what we've got on there with some modifications. The minimum certificate of design work, of course, has been updated to the version that we have on the website there. This is to make it, we originally did it so that it was more fraud resistant after some feedback from Auckland City Council. Since then, we've had engineers telling us that that it's really good and that they like it. It's nice and easy to fill out. All of the stuff, of course, will auto-populate, and so that there's going to be less, you know, chances of error throughout there. Similarly with this, you know, so you just got to make sure that your drawings and so on are all matching what's on there. Here's the structural maintenance schedule, and so one of the things on there, please do remember that it's a template. So really only put on the things that you're actually do have maintenance, you know, requirements for. Most residential buildings don't have a plant room as a pretty good example of it, and so saying that you need to inspect the plant room is sort of reducing the effectiveness of the document. And here's the construction monitoring schedule. This isn't the same, of course, because it's part of the PowerPoint, but as you can see, then internal beams and connections said that they're steel beams in this one, so they would be inspected by an engineer. Similarly with the posts, but you've got some, you know, jib bracing walls or something along those lines in there, and a BCO is more than competent to fill those out. Now, because that'll be coming in with the consent documentation, then the you know, it lets the council know right up front what they're expected, what you're expecting them to inspect, and it lets the builder and the architect and so on know in there as well. And so what's next? As I say, you know, I'm intending to keep doing this for geotechnical and fire engineers so that it's nice and easy for them. They have, you know, just the same sorts of issues as what I discovered for the structural engineers. And after that, it's continually improve it. You know, I'm really relying on the feedback that you know, you give me because you use it every day and much more frequently than I do. And the construction monitoring guidelines are going to be coming out. I've been trying to finish those for about the last 6 months now, but I think I'm around about 90% of the way there. So hopefully by the end of the year. And that's pretty well me. Has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Martin. That was a fabulous overview and great to see that, to be able to go through the forms. Now, I know that some of you have put in the comment boxes that you did have trouble reading them on the screen, and so we do apologise about that, just working within the system that as best we can, but we will be you know, there is a link to the forms in the Q&A, was one of the very first comments that came up from Martin. So you can link onto that and have a look at them in your own time as well and have a wee play too. So we have a lot of questions, as you can probably expect, Martin and Adam. So we'll go through these. I think some of them will be quick and some of them may not be. So please bear with me as I do the best that I can on this. One of the questions we have is some councils have their own version of PS1. Is there any plan to have a unique form across New Zealand? Now, you talked about that a little bit in terms of the A series, Adam, but how does that apply to all the series of the producer statements?
Well, look, our advice to all practitioners is to use the if you like, the standard, the Engineering New Zealand ACNZ forms. Because you will find subtle differences and perhaps increased liabilities if you use the council forms. So, and I guess one of the things perhaps we haven't touched on is that the new forms are really very much designed to be used by chartered professional engineers, and part of the reasoning for this is the forthcoming changes that we're imagining will come with occupational licensing from MB and the government. So we know that many BCAs will have arrangements with perhaps non-CP engineers, CP engineers that they've known for a long time and trust their work and understand that they will work within their recognised practice area, and there's no reason why that sort of arrangement should not continue, and maybe that's an occasion to use the BCA's own version. But if you have the option, I would, as I say, certainly use standard forms, and you should report back to Helen or Martin if any BCAs put pressure on you to sign their version and not the standard version.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Okay, another question is that the default wording in the PS1 on the first page shown suggests part only. Some councils have taken issue with this recently. Napier has been given as an example. Has this been resolved or discussed by BCAs? Do you have any insights into that, Martin or Adam?
Yes, this is something that I did a webinar on, I think it was late last year. There's also an article that Adam and I authored, and in conjunction with a BCA around all or part only. And I put the link to that underneath that comment, actually, because I saw that come through. So read through the article. I'm pretty sure that the webinar is embedded inside that, is embedded inside the article. And yeah, we actively engage with BCAs throughout the country around this. They've all got my contact details, and they give us a call to work through it.
Yeah, I think if you looked at the drop-down box process that Martin went through, there is very much the option to do all or part, and so if you're confident of saying all, then do it. But I guess industry advice would be, in most cases, you should be ticking part. Won't go for all the reasons, but as we know, for example, if you're doing B1, if you're a structural engineer, there are many parts of building design and process that we don't design or we don't construction monitor. Even you might say, well, what about a simple timber retaining wall? Surely I can tick all for that, but you don't design the chemicals that go in for the preservation, for example, and you certainly don't construction monitor those. So again, it's pretty firm advice to, in almost all cases, you should use the part box.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, we do have a few questions around that have come through, a few comments around things that could be considered for the forms. So just I'd like to acknowledge those, and we will take those forward in the feedback where you've put suggestions for different things to be considered. But in the interest of time, we'll just proceed through on some of the particular questions that have come through. But one of those, Martin, is the question is, to save time, is there much capability in the online form to save personal company details or standard wording that we typically use on similar projects?
Yeah, as I said, that's actually captured within your browser, and so you can just set that up within your browser settings.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But for most of us, we may need to refer to our IT experts to just get that running smoothly, I'd suggest.
Yeah, I got to admit, my 13-year-old daughter showed me how to do it.
Adam, I have a question perhaps for you, and that relates to why in the liability section we have the drop down of the 200 and the 500. So and the question is why we don't have a section where you can fill in any other liability or insurance amount.
I was hoping that question came up. Look, as Martin said, we've had a lot of discussion about that, and the advice, very firm advice from particularly our insurers, but also our lawyers, is that we should remain staunch at that at the 200,000. We have put the drop down in there really for the outliers, and Hutt City is certainly the one that I'm aware of who insist on having 500. I would very much encourage people not to offer that up to other BCAs. And it's worth just reflecting that, you know, our main area of liability is not to the council, but to our clients. And again, you know, we will normally have a short form or a CCCS in which we limit our liability, which we certainly should. I acknowledge, of course, that for small residential clients, that's not really applicable, covered by the Consumer Guarantee Act. But certainly for those of us who work in the commercial area, we need to consider that we might be offering quite a bigger limit of liability to our client. That might be 500,000, might be in the millions. But what we need to remember is that, again, we have advice that the limit of liability that you offer to a BCA is additive to what you have offered to your client. We need to acknowledge in these times that PI insurance is getting harder to obtain, and we find, I think many of us are finding reluctance from our insurers to increase liabilities beyond what we've been using for a long time. And that, you know, this reflects what's happening around the world with disasters, climate change, all those things that are draining down the reserves of insurers and reinsurers across the world. If we let that get, if those numbers get too high, probabilities are that, in fact, the ability to get insurance may well disappear. So it's a cautionary tale, and I say the prime advice is to remain staunch and to stick to the 200,000. To my knowledge, just about all the BCAs, with the exception of one or two, will accept that level.
Great, thank you, Adam. A couple more questions about the forms and the online system itself. So there's been a couple of questions come through around the security of the information on the form. So information that's entered into the incognito form and stored, how is it secure? Is it available to Engineering New Zealand or TAs or others? How do we protect that?
Actually, we've got Jean from Incognito here for exactly these types of questions, and so I'll pass this one over to him.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Cognito Forms has good security. The data's encrypted. It does actually go into a database that Engineering New Zealand and ACE could have access to. There'd be no reason for anyone to do that. The way that it's been set up really is to provide a really fast way of preparing a draft of these documents. So it's not intended to be a database that has ongoing usage. Matt and I can probably share some of the information that we've got from Cognito Forms around the security, which you could then make available and people could form their views around, if that's okay with them. But they've just gone through quite a robust audit and security process that they've shared details of, which I can pass on.
Lovely, thank you, Jean. The next question is around revision control on the producer statements and whether there's a means to do this. So the comment is that often our producer statements or our PS1s have to get reissued when drawing revisions change, etc.
That's an interesting question. If a revision is a minor change in terms of as defined under the building regulations, if it's a significant change, then an amendment to a building consent is likely to be required. In that situation, it's appropriate to issue a fresh producer statement rather than to revise an existing one. I'm not aware of a practice to revise existing ones. Certainly in our own practice here, if there's an amendment to the consent, then we will issue a new PS1. At the end of the day, of course, we only issue one PS4, and that would list the various different consent numbers and the amendments that have occurred during the project. Don't know if that answers the question. Martin, any thoughts?
No, I wasn't 100% sure on that one, and I think you've answered it well. Thank you.
Okay, great. So here's a question that it's possibly been answered by you, Martin, but sorry, Adam, around what the producer statements really exist for. So the question is, some building works are exempted from building consent. However, clients still require the PS1 for their own records to ensure the design carried out or reviewed by CPEng. Is there any alternative form for the exempted works that still requires CPEng sign-off? Now, you took us through before who these documents are intended for and who should be thinking about signing them off. Is there anything you'd like to add in response to that question?
Look, I think that the appropriate bit that I talked about was actually about the A series. So I think you've got to say that the standard forms are really only for when you're applying for a building consent or for a code compliance certificate at the end of the project. And the wording on it is very specific to that. So if you try to amend that for something that's not covered, doesn't require a building consent, it gets messy, and so don't do it. I guess many of us have, for those sorts of things, have done a letter in the past saying similar things to a producer statement, but just saying that we've, the design's been compliant with certain clauses, etc. But writing your own letter, there is the danger that if you in fact give away more liability, you expose yourself greater than you would by issuing a producer statement. That's part of the reason why we're issuing the A series, and I guess we are all very keen to get that out in the marketplace pretty soon.
Yeah, as an update to that, I've had numerous queries about the same thing, and it's one of the reasons why we are pushing to get these out as quickly as we can. The documents have actually all been finished. Adam sent them through to me a week or two ago, and we've all agreed on how to go forwards with that. I sent them off to Gene, and he is currently working on getting them online, through the incognito system, so that we can be putting them through there again. At that point, as Adam was saying earlier, then we will be releasing both the PDFs and the incognito version for people to be using. And I forgot to say at the beginning of this that the people will still be able to download a PDF, just the same as they can now, of the updated producer statements. It is not just going to be through the online, but we assume that it is going to be a lot easier for people to do it that way.
Thank you, Martin. That is a question that's come up a little bit throughout the webinar. Now, I do have a question here, which is presumably the original producer statement forms will be acceptable as a new form doesn't fit for geotechnical or fire. Now, on our webinar yesterday, Martin, you talked about some work to adapt for geotechnical engineers and fire engineers, as a producer statement will need some different flows. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, or timeframes around that work?
So that's something that I'm starting just about straight away. And the issue with it so far has been actually engaging with geotechs to get their feedback into it. It's relatively easy with the structural because structural engineer, so is Adam, and and a fairly good contacts within. NGO have very kindly offered to give us a hand with that. The Wellington branch has, and so I'll be working with them to get something together pretty quickly. After that, it's just a matter of getting the formatting through.
Great, thank you. Next question: will admin staff be able to do all the legwork preparing these for the engineers review like we currently do? Yeah,
as I said, so you'll be able to get the link, and exactly as I showed, the link will be able to go and just sit on your browser. I'm intending to change the link every 12 months, as so that this is a member only benefit. So it's an encouragement to keep your membership there. But so your admin person will absolutely be able to go in, fill out the forms and so on, and do it just the same way as they are now. It looks like Adam may have a comment on that.
No, it wasn't actually, but I do have a question, Martin, which people might ask. What does it cost?
To use these forms, it's a member benefit. There's no cost to the membership.
Okay, sorry, I'm just filtering through the screeds of questions that we have here, which are fabulous. We've answered some of them. Some of the comments that have come through, again, really good points have been raised. We'll take those forward into consideration. So one question is, the form seems to have a lot of information that can be included. What is the driver behind this? Wouldn't it be better just to refer to the design features report or the design report?
Yeah, so as I said, the big driver behind this is to integrate the information. So when I've been talking to BCAs throughout the country, you know, I've got copies of their RFI data for the last few years, and I got and 50% of it, 50% of the RFIs that engineers get is around this documentation, right? And so by doing this, then I'm trying to cut your RFIs in half, essentially. You know, I worked out that, you know, if we spend somewhere around about half an hour on an RFI, and you get at least one of those every couple of weeks, you know, then how much money are you, you know, can you be saving? And over the course of a year, it's a fairly significant amount. So the idea behind all of this is to provide standardized information to BCAs so that they will be less inclined to, send back saying that they can't find the information, and it'll all be there, easy for you to put into the forms, and essentially set a common sort of standard throughout the country.
I just add there, I think it's perhaps fair to say, Martin, that that, you know, the detailed information to put into the data system, if you like, is primarily aimed at smaller residential projects. If you're doing complex work or commercial projects, sure, you're going to do your own bespoke design features report and attach that. And so then you wouldn't bother to put in that, you know, the wind load data and that sort of stuff if you're doing a bigger job. Is that fair, Martin, I think?
Yeah, that's right. You know, what we've got to remember is that around about 75% of the, you know, the work that goes on inside New Zealand and the engineering work is residential. You know, if we take that from the 2019 brands data. And so, as I said, well, yesterday actually, you know, the vast majority of engineering firms inside New Zealand are fairly small firms, and this is what that documentation is aimed at. It's aimed at the residential work by smaller practitioners. You know, I would assume that the likes of Dunning Thornton, for example, have got all of these systems and processes set up already, and you don't need to use it. That's brilliant. You know, it's not really for you. It is more aimed at the smaller practitioners to make life easier for them.
Thanks, Martin. And speaking of making life easy, we've got a question here around whether the design features report can be downloaded and used on Android phones. Do you know the answer to that?
It can certainly be downloaded. It's been able to be downloaded for the last you know, year or so. It's already there on the if you log into your Engineering New Zealand members area. And actually, I'll put my email address into the comments, and if you've got these sorts of things, then just send me an email.
Right. So if you're downloading it and it's not working well for you, let us know and we'll look to see what we can do to make that easy.
Well, I know that the PDF doesn't work well, right? It is quite clunky and difficult to use, but it's the only technology that we have available. So the web people tell me that we could use up until now, and that is one of the big reasons why we've partnered up with Incognito, is because it makes it a far more flexible, easy to use form for people. I have actually used this system through my mobile phone, and so I would assume that if you're going through and you're using it on a tablet or something along those lines, then yeah, you should be able to do it pretty easily.
Lovely. Thank you, Martin. And still on the theme of making things easy for people, and this might be a question for Jean if you're still with us, but the question is, are there APIs available for these forms to integrate into our existing job client management software?
Yes, good question. Cognito Forms does have some limitations in terms of like how easily it can be integrated into systems to pull data out. Surprisingly, it can actually do a lot in terms of pushing data back into other systems, but Yeah, I think for that type of thing, it probably goes back to the original comment about maybe there's a bigger process that needs to be looked at before sort of jumping to solution there. So it would be, I'd be happy to chat about what systems they are and how the overall process would work, and yeah, try and understand that first.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jean. Okay, Martin, 2 questions for you. Says, hi Martin, 2 questions. 1, can we identify alternative solutions together with B1 VM1 solutions on the same PS1? So it's the first question. I'll let you answer that one before I confuse with the second one.
Yes, sorry, I just realised I was on mute. Yes, you can.
Actually, just follow up to that, Martin. And I think it's right. The producer statement should say, the PS1 should say that it's designed to to be B1 VM1 and or an alternative solution. It's not either or.
Okay, great. And the second part of the question is just a query whether we're mixing B1 with VM, i.e. said, with B1 AS1 solutions. So B1 AS1 solution should not be the subject to a producer statement, as an engineer is not required, but at the discretion of the owner. Does that question make sense to you?
I didn't hear a question in there. Did you? Sorry, what was the question?
I think it was a statement suggesting that acceptable solutions don't need a producer statement. Now, while one in my heart, I would agree with that, but the reality is that BCAs, in particular for residential work, so if you're talking about restricted building work, where you need to take, somebody needs to take responsibility for the various parts of the design. It is, I think most of us do, except that we will include aspects of AS1 or AS2, whatever it is, together with the VM, along with the verification methods. Don't know if that. So I'm just slightly I think it was more of a comment, and I'm just countering that, and I'm saying I think that majority of practice is that we will also include acceptable solutions along with verification methods in our producer statement.
Great, thank you.
And as a follow-up to that, the next logical question would be, can you state that? And the answer is yes.
Great. Okay. Comment, a design features report template for dams would be great. So we will carry that forward.
Once again, if that person could provide me with a template for a design features report for a dam, then that would be excellent. Not being a dam engineer, I don't know what they need.
Oh, but you are a dam engineer. Sorry.
Very good.
Okay. Just a few comments that come through. Can the forms be changed once submitted? Who does it get sent to once you click submit? Is it just a PDF email to yourself?
Yeah, it is. It's a PDF that comes through to you.
Great.
But you can go back and change it. So I think that's what they were asking. So yes, you can go back into the document and change it, and then hit go again, and then it'll send out through a new one. Jean's nodding, and so I'm pretty sure that I'm right on that one.
That's right, and you can actually share it as well. So the email that comes through to you would have an edit link in it. So I think somebody asked, could somebody start it and then send it to someone else who can review it and finish it? So that should be possible as well.
Great. A few questions on that, so that's great to hear. Okay, I've got one more question. A few people have asked about PS3. And do we know if an organisation is completing a review of the PS3 constructor certificate template?
Well, the PS3, you have to say, has various different forms and can be signed by lots of different people, from builders, applicators, subbies, and so it is much harder to have a uniform form. That's never been, of course, produced by Engineering New Zealand or ACE NZ, but the forms do, I think, usually refer to the Schedule 6 of 3109. So the standard form that will go out with a standard construction contract. It's actually not a bad point, and it might be worth us just thinking about adapting one. I mean, it won't be used by our members, but having one that is perhaps gives a bit more information about the quality of the person who signed it, because I guess many of us have seen PS3s which with a scroll on the bottom, very little about what there is their competency to do so. So that's a good point. I think we should take that on board.
Yeah, we could probably work in with another organisation like Master Builders or something along those lines, maybe to get that out. But what I have discovered since working at Engineering New Zealand is that these things never happen quickly. So don't expect it tomorrow or probably even this year.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. We are going to have to wrap up now because it's 11 o'clock. So I want to first thank our presenters, so Adam and Martin. Thanks so much for taking us through those changes today and answering a lot of the questions that our members have. For those of you online, thank you so much for your time today, letting us take you through these documents, and for your really thoughtful questions and comments. We have captured them all, so even though we didn't get to everything today, please note that we'll carry those forward into the to our review. As we said, this is part of a consultation process, so do spend some time looking at the forms in more detail, fill out our survey, which Martin posted earlier, and give us your feedback on the workability of these. Let us know what we might have missed or if there's anything else we should consider. So the most important thing is we make these documents workable for you. And from there, we'll be looking to finalising, and we'll let you know through the process where we're at. So that's it from us today. Again, thank you for your time. Go well.
Cheers. Thanks all.
Thank you.